everyone. How are you all doing? We just ended the last conversation on coffee. So how many of you have had coffee in the day? 1 coffee? 2 coffees? 3? Oh, few of you. OK, cool. So I have a new rule in my life, which is to stop having coffee after 2 p.m. because it messes my sleep. I don't want to be too energetic throughout evening, so I have a new method to be alert, to keep the vibe going, but not on coffee. Do you want to know what I do? I just switch to wine, because it keeps the vibe going. And I'm not too energetic, but I love what I'm doing, so it keeps it on until 6 p.m. And then it could be vodka shots, depending on the day. Yeah. So as you all know, this is a panel on AI. But we're not going to touch on the topic of what is AI, is it good, bad, but what we are going to do in this conversation is get into how can we really leverage the power of AI. How can we use it to create value? And when I say value, it's about business models. And businesses are always there to create value for stakeholders, shareholders, the society, on the overall globe. Without much further ado, I'd like to invite my really, really cool and diverse panelists onto the stage. Please come on, Isabel, Johan, Axel, Marcus, please. Cool. I wanna start with a little bit of an exercise because it's 3 p.m. It's going to be 3 p.m. and it's after lunch, so I know everyone's tired, sleepy, yawning. So I will invite you all to take a deep breath in. Inhale. Exhale. Now inhale, ChatGPT. Please, yes. Exhale, startup ideas. Come on. The next one, very interesting one. Inhale, generative AI. Exhale, productivity. Yes. Now that we have AI in our system, let's start the conversation. Yes. So I have one open-ended question to start the conversation, which is, it's a well-known truth that generative AI, or AI, is a term that's frequenting our everyday conversation. And I want to ask our panelists, do you really see the value in the term AI? Or do founders that pitch to you guys when you have this conversation, do they really understand the importance? Do they have value? Or do you think they're using it because it's cool? I'll start with Isabel. So what do you think? Yeah.
Well, who are founders in here? Have you used the word AI in your pitch? Keep your hands up. OK. Do you know what it means? And investors, who likes to invest in AI? Yeah. So we know already today that it's like a hype. But as investors, we go through many hypes. And I think the question is, how are we going to use AI to solve our world problems? As for the entrepreneurs in this room, this is your job. We're solving problems, right? And where can actually technology help it and make it more effective for you to use AI? And I think we have a few great founders in the room, like Marcus, who will talk about how he uses it. But you need a lot of data, or you need also synthetic data, a portfolio startup that you just invested in, to create the baseline for your use case. And the other question is, where does it drive value? As an investor, we look for return on our investment. So the question is of scalability. So that can you actually train a model and then do this over several customers and not end up in silos? So I would kind of ask the question back to you guys and to think about, where can you really effectively use AI in your businesses? Think about it, make a cost-benefit analysis, because you're going to need engineers and data scientists to implement it. So that's how I'm thinking about it at the moment. When a startup pitches me, they're doing something with AI.
So please follow that with a quick introduction so people know who they're listening to. I just realized we forgot to introduce ourselves. Ooh, good. I think I should have had a coffee and not wine. Yes, yeah, go ahead.
So I'm from Zurich, and we invest in early-stage women-led ventures. So love this group of women in here that are building startups. And we also do a lot in working on how we can use AI for investment decision-making, because it's quite biased, and it's really based on our gut feeling. And I'm kind of fascinated by the problem to see if we can have more processes and system that is effective and fast to help us make better decisions and invest, hopefully, more diverse in the future.
Cool, cool.
Hey, I feel like I have to skip the first question because I don't do pitches and investments and all that, but I'm more like the marginalized corporate in this setting, I feel.
That's the intro?
That's not the intro. That was skipping the first question. That was the second question. So my name is Johan. I oversee, among others, AI policy and partnerships for Meta, formerly Facebook, now obviously Instagram, WhatsApp, and many others. And we've been investing in AI over the past, I want to say 12 years, probably. So we've been, and you've been using our tools, obviously, that feed your experience on the apps ever since. And I'm happy to explain a little bit why we do this and why we started so early and what's coming in our eyes for the next 10 to 15 years.
Yes.
Handing over to the next one.
Thank you very much. My name is Axel Andal. I'm from Vienna. I'm a lawyer doing 23 years IT now. And I've seen lots of the hypes and buzzwords.
Yes.
And AI is definitely very important currently. And I'm heading at order the ITIP group and the digital industry group. And we have lots to do with AI. And coming back to your question, I would distinguish on the one side, your question to the audience was right. If you do funding, if you do investment, AI is the new blockchain, I would say.
Yeah.
So it's the successor somehow, and if you want to be hip, if you want to raise money, it's good to have the buzzwords somewhere in your pitch deck. But on the other side, I also see lots of real business cases and much going on out there. So yes, ChatGPT is a hype and somehow boosted the topic.
Yeah.
But besides that, for years, companies had been dealing with AI and have really used it. And I think we're on a different level now, but it had been there before. And so I think it's here to stay. And yes, you can employ it and use it.
Thank you. Markus?
Hi, thanks for having me today. My name is Markus Holzer. I'm CEO and co-founder of ContextFlow. I have my background in medical computer science. And got the chance in 2016 to spin off a company from a European research project at the Medical University of Vienna. And basically then onwards transitioned from a scientist to being a CEO, learning all the things to build a startup. I think 2016 was the first time I heard the word pitch. And I think since then I've done 500 plus pitches.
Wow.
Yeah, what we do at ContextFlow is we help radiologists to diagnose diseases on chest CT scans faster and with more accuracy. So in general, we really work towards improving the healthcare and making sure that we as patients, or hopefully not being patients, get basically a faster and more accurate treatment. And you mentioned data, right? So data is kind of the source for any AI model. And what is even more challenging in the medical domain is the access to data, right? You have data in terms of workflow and efficiency that you can apply, but then also you have obviously patient data and imaging data that then really targets and enables you to support physicians in certain diseases. And this, I think, is again a big difference, and this is why in the medical domain, compared to like what Meta, for example, is able to do, we are usually a few years behind. And that's, I think, mainly to data access, but also obviously the regulatory constraints that you have as a medical device provider. I'm happy to talk more about that in the course of the panel.
Thank you so much. I'll also introduce myself. I'm Jay. I am on the VC side. I work with the FundF. Our mandate is to invest in gender-diverse founding teams across Europe in tech propositions. That means hardware, software, anything between that as well. AI, definitely one of the things that we look at. Now, you guys touched on something really, really interesting, that while there is a hype that's going on, it has really enabled us to do things that we've not been able to do. So my question is, do you think AI has sort of helped us jump through or accelerate through certain changes in industries, especially the undigitized or under-digitized industries, in a much more way, in a much faster way that other technologies couldn't do? For example, there were other hype cycles like metaverse, blockchain, NFTs. So what do you think, what is the power of AI that is enabling new businesses, that's sort of bringing in new business models? One example that you touched upon, synthetic data, is 5 years ago, I wouldn't have invested in, I wouldn't have thought that selling just data, that is synthetic data, not someone else's personal data, could have been a proper business model. But today, because of AI, because of the computing power that we have, that's a possibility, and that enables so much more innovation. So maybe I'll start with Marcus, with the medical tech, and then we'll sort of come through the panel.
Yeah, I have to come back that we're always a bit late to the technology party in the medical sector.
Yeah.
The main reason why AI is a bit behind there is also pure IT infrastructure being available or not available in hospitals over the last years. So there's been a big transition at hospital institutions or clinical institutions to switch and upgrade their IT systems. So I feel like the last, from 2010 to like 2020, that was a big effort. And I think we're now getting to a stage where the providers are actually have built the baseline to actually use and make use of AI. Because basically in medical imaging domain that we're in, you have an AI adoption rate between 1.5% and 2%. Right, and this is kind of an equivalent of where you are actually able to deploy it at the moment. So we are in a very early stage in that regard, and we are not yet in kind of general AI topic. We're really deploying very specific AI solutions with more narrow value propositions that have an impact, because there's a whole issue about generative AI in terms of the things that it might dream up that is might not 100% correct. In the medical domain, if it's not 100% correct, then you have a big issue. So yeah, these are my thoughts on that at the moment.
Cool. Great segue, but I'll wait to get into the segue. So any of you have points to add on that in terms of what has AI enabled us to do that other technologies have not helped us get so far?
I think Meta would have the one or the other example where it's already very useful.
I don't know exactly where to start. I definitely think the main aspect that we've been seeing coming over the past years is computational power. So we see chips that can basically aggregate data and compute in paces that were not foreseeable in the past. Now the question around quality of data obviously is one that we should probably discuss at some later stage. I think having data is one thing, being able to use it is the other thing, and the quality of data and the way you evaluate is the other thing. But we have been investing in research and also in data centers, as you know, quite heavily over the past years already. I think only last year it was around something ridiculous, around $30 billion into sort of research centers.
30 billion, yeah.
So that's why we think that we need to have an approach where, I mean, it's almost impossible to sort of leapfrog that. There is a few players. That's going to be Alphabet, it's going to be Amazon, Apple, the big players. Obviously, not to forget China, which is an incredible competitor in this field. So the question is, how can we make this accessible to a broader ecosystem, I think. That's why we opt for an open source system where we make sure that researchers, universities, startups have access to an aggregated pool of data that they can use, so don't start from scratch. And that's where we are as a company. But I think I'd be curious to learn where you guys are with the open or closed approach, how you use the systems we have in place.
So, I mean, I don't know who started using AI before last year, but like at least for our research, the leverage that we've had, it's kind of the year of AI. That's why we're sitting here talking about it probably. And I think that has a lot to do with what you just said, Johan, the computational power, the speed, and also I say the interfaces that maybe your competitor like OpenAI has created for us to make, hopefully, these end use cases more tangible. And I think it is much broader applicable than blockchain, as an example. The applicability is just wider at this point. The question is where we will take it and how it will be used. There's so much playground that you can use it, because you can use it in virtually all industries. And I think also because the amount of data that you need to train models is changing a bit, it can also be very beneficial in use cases that we didn't think it would be possible before. Like for our sense, right, we're training maybe on 500 pitch decks and it's becoming okay. It used to be not enough data, right? So this is also something that is a huge leverage at the moment.
That's a great use case. I want to come to Axel.
I would distinguish between ChatGPT and other services like ChatGPT, because that's for me, it's a killer application, don't get me wrong, but it's for me more like playing around and not really business in the end. Yes, you can use it to create texts. Yes, you can be so stupid and ask them about recent court cases or legislation and then wonder that the answer is not accurate. But it's a different pair of shoes for me compared to real business cases. And there are lots of real business cases, and I would name health. Not institutions, but startups that do a lot of things with data. And I would also name industries who have lots of data where you can derive things out of it, where you can get results by analyzing the data. Which is predominantly banks and insurance companies, and they already use it. So there are real use cases which are not seen on the market because it's in the background, and everyone is looking and going for ChatGPT because it's the kill application. And I go with you that basically we don't have a general AI or a godlike AI. We still have a weak, or in some areas, a stronger AI, which makes sense in a specific narrow
vertical niche
purpose, and there you can put it in, and it brings very good results. And there was the discussion when ChatGPT graded up from 3.5 to 5.0, like if this is the progress, then we will be very soon having a godlike AI. But that was the discussion we had 4 or 5 months ago, where some said in 3 months it could be already the case, and it did not happen. So I think it will take a little bit more time, but there are use cases.
On that note, I also want to pick your brains and your experience on when we see the power of AI and how much value it can derive, how it enables people that have an idea to really bring things to fruition faster. What have been the problems, given that you also are in the IT legal sector? Do you see new challenges coming up with AI growing so fastly? Yeah.
If David Bowie now sings a current song, it shows that there are legal issues involved. But that's the very obvious one. So you have lots of copyright issues. Both on the side of getting the data into the machine, into the system, and the work results created then. By accident, if you have bad luck, the work result is infringing someone else's copyright because the machine does not create something on its own, but because there is not that much data in there, it's just a copy of something that was already made by a human. So there are lots of copyright issues involved, lots of personal rights issues. And then, of course, the biggest one is data protection. And the most important one is ethics. And that's something that is not really stipulated by law yet. But the AI Act is going in that direction and tries to stipulate that and give some ground rules how to deal with that.
Cool. Just a note to all the founders that are thinking about doing AI-based things, ChatGPT-based things. Keep in mind copyright issues, privacy issues, whose data, IP are you violating, just to be careful. Yeah, but I want to go back to you.
Yeah, just I'd like to pivot to what it means for, and given this is a very diverse set of people, to the notion of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what it actually means for that. So if you take, let's say, Llama 2, which is our model, or ChatGPT, it's basically trained, so let's call it computational linguistics. So probably just for some framing, some of the biggest breakthroughs has been happening in the area of languages. So we speak, our words are being used and transformed into knowledge, basically. And this knowledge and these words, let's take a language as power, for example. We think there's a lot of power behind words and the words we use, replicate, reproduce, etc. So the data that is currently with the biggest machines that are outputting information is very much fed by historically white people that are largely male and also largely straight, I want to say. So when you, for example, type hand into ChatGPT, you'll find a white hand, mainly a man's hand in this output. That's going to be the text to image. So one of the biggest challenges, I think, for how we evolve these machines, and it's going to be very important because they will decide so much of what we think is going to be knowledge of the future, is how do we embed diversity, equity, inclusion into these learning systems. And we are just in the beginning, but I think it's very important to legally also embed these functions and these moderation tools into the future, because otherwise the content will just reproduce itself and we know what the output might eventually be.
And I mean, there's like the city of New York said that when you have an HR system based on AI, that the input factors, they have to deliver on that, right? They have to get a certificate and authenticate like what input factors are you putting into the LLMs that train then and select people. So we're starting to see these regulations. You know what's happening in the EU, but I followed that New York decision because I thought it was interesting, probably also needed to protect people to a certain point, and we're talking about possibilities for the ones that want to like leverage AI in their business models, that they know what is the playing field. But on the level of input and on the level of processing, this will be very important. That also a lot of you women and people of color and different also identifying, genders and sexualities are represented when creating AI. I mean, I really think it's such a good thing that we're talking about it here and that all of you use it and put your footprint on it.
Just to add to that, that's to give you one example, because I feel like we tend to be abstract in these AI fields.
Yeah, stories, more stories.
Yeah,
more stories.
so one area we have been very much investing in over the past years is image recognition on the apps, Instagram and Facebook, but also in private messaging. So for example, if you take child pornography, which is unfortunately not too uncommon to circulate, you would want to have a machine that recognizes any kind of skin color. And if that's not the case, if the machine and the image recognition machine has not been trained accordingly, it will only recognize white skin. That's, for example, one thing where I think we have been on the forefront and also, not doing everything right, obviously, but this is the conversation we're having internally as to what is a smart machine, how can it outsmart the competitor or someone who has a bad intent on the apps. And this is, I think, one example that hopefully gives you a bit of feeling of what we're doing internally.
I'm happy to bring another one. You bring the example of like the white hat. I think the challenge that we have in the medical domain is that these biases then have like immediate impact on the patients, and there is some things that for example, for breast cancer, right? So physicians know that the density of the breast is different for a European female than for Asian, for example. So there, you would not train an AI model on European data and then deploy it in Asia, for example, because you have no idea how it will perform there. And that's an obvious one, but the obvious ones are the easy ones. There are a lot of subtle things that we are not aware of or we don't have on top of our mind that I think the AI Act is a first step in that direction that really puts emphasis on understanding the database that you train your models on. Understand it in terms of the data, which patient population does the data represent, which scanner types, which regions, etc., because all of these have an impact on the performance of the model then in practice. And in the early phases of rolling out AI in medical imaging, you've seen models that, for example, detect lung nodules for cancer that performed really well on single data sets, and there were publications that say radiologists will be replaced by AI because it's already better, clearly better. And then these systems are deployed in the clinical routine, and you realize that the performance drops from 98% to like 80%. And it's really, yeah, that's a big issue, right? And this is something where you really need to have a scientific approach, understand the data set, understand the AI model, and also appreciate the complexity of the problems that you're solving. I think that's also one thing that is really underestimated, is that you have an AI that can create a good output for a certain scenario, but if you put it in the context where it's being used, it really very quickly becomes clear that that's nice, but it's only solving a very small thing of the overall problem that you have in a specific field. So that's, I think, another topic that is on top of that, is not only the quality of the algorithms, but then also in what setting do you use them. And yeah, radiologists are not only detecting nodules in the lung, there's like hundreds and hundreds of diseases that you need to take care for, that you need to consider in these things.
Thank you so much for that. So great points. So when we think about business models, creating value through businesses, I think there are three main things. The first one's people. People that are builders, the team, the employees. Second one's people again, the one that sells. And the third one is people again, the one that buys. So by the end of the day, we are in an ecosystem, we have technology, but then by the end of the day, there's a person at the end, the receiving end of it. So sometimes I often think when we think about technologies in abstract terms, we forget that there's a human working with it or using it, or the AI is being used on them on some context, whatever. So, and because we're on the topic of people, I want to understand, how do you think the power of AI can sort of bridge the gap of gender bias, or increase more diversity in workplaces, in sales, or in medical context, in different industries which are male-dominated? I know there's no solution right now, and we're going in the right direction, but we're moving, but then slowly. But what do you think people can do better? What do you think, how do you think business owners and startups, VCs, investors can use the power of AI to reduce their own bias, to see things that they're not usually seeing? Because we're always busy, we're running around. So I'd love to pick your brains on what are you doing, or what do you think would work? Yeah. Yes, anybody?
Well,
yeah.
What we know today is that if a machine gives you feedback, you're more willing to listen to it than a human if it's very, tells you, you're biased. However, if the machine does a wrong suggestion, you're less likely to trust it. So if it does a mistake, mistake tolerance is very low. So I think within that, this is what we're looking at, is human decision making, and how can machines help us make decisions. I think it's still the human that is going to make the investment decision in the end, but I'm really interested to see, will the feedback given from the machine be more respondent than the other way around? Because it goes without saying that a lot of VCs know they have to source more women-led ventures, but they're like, oh, they don't exist. And I'm like, okay, I know a few, and you can come to this event next year. But this is where the kind of fascination that I have at the moment in our research, to figure out, how do we enable humans with AI, their workflows, their decision-making, and how could it also decrease bias? I have to tell you, at the moment, we don't have the evidence yet. We're seeing if it actually works, and maybe a few years from now, the evidence can talk to itself, but we think it's possible, because we know through standardized decision-making prospects, if you just see an investment memo and you don't see who the founder is, what color the person has, you're more likely to make an objective decision.
I think that you have to distinguish on different levels. First, AI can help to have more objective decisions because it's based on the data.
Yeah.
But in the end, you still need a human to decide, also for legal reasons, because if it's an automated decision which has an impact on a person, then you need the consent of the person that the decision is made. And it's not okay, for example, to have the machine decided if you get a loan, if you get an insurance coverage, if you get a job. But it might help to give you the basis, which is a little bit more unbiased, but just because it just goes onto the
data facts,
But there are two downsides. The first one is that data by itself might also be biased or might be based on I maybe rephrase it like, or give you an example. Someone who is called Kevin has a very high likelihood of not being that wealthy, especially if he lives in a certain area. And the result from the machine could be that whenever a Kevin applies for a loan, he does not get it. It's objective. It's based on data, and it might be right to 80%. But 20% of the Kevins are the poor ones who don't get the loan, but who would have met all the criteria. So even facts could result in a bias because there's always a minority that you also have to reflect. And they have to come from the other side, like then sorting them out and seeing, okay, this is the good Kevin. Sorry, all the Kevins out there. That's one side. And the other side is what you already mentioned. I may also rephrase it in my best French, shit in, shit out.
That's true,
That's the problem with AI. And if the
Yeah.
data is not accurate and if the data is biased, then it's very difficult to get a better or more objective decision.
And I'm happy to jump on that one
Yes.
because I think also what the AI tries to do is you need to understand the bias in your data. So a big topic is really transparency in that context as well. So transparency maybe not in a sense of making all the data accessible to everyone, but transparency in a sense where we have statistics about on what data is the model trained on and what kind of statistics and information is relevant to make sure that there is as little bias as possible, and showing statistics about data sets, and this will be required also for medical devices in the future, that you show what is the data set basis in terms of scanner distribution, in terms of gender, etc. How are they represented in your data set, and how does the performance look for maybe some of these subsegments will be really essential for any medical device. But I think that's something that also in other domains, and I think Meta is also working in that direction to have access to data to train models and enable that are, I think, good steps in the right direction in that regard. Again, it's all data-based, and if you provide transparency around that, you will also be able maybe not to have the perfect solution, but at least you understand whether or not there is bias in the data and act upon that. Yeah.
I don't have too much to add, just to get us back to sort of a meta level. I think we should not be too naive in thinking that the machine will solve problems that we are facing today. As I initially said, I think the machine will, and when in doubt, reproduce what we have in place already. So we as a community should be very aware about where the journey is headed. We should still have the conversations around where are we with looking at C-levels, representation, quotas. I don't think the AI will solve that at all. I think one thing that human beings will always keep as a superpower and as a skill that I think will also be more relevant in the future is empathy. So the machine will never be able to replace. You know, you go to a doctor, he might have the best data sets and the best outcome and, you know, the best diagnosis. You still might have a horrible experience because it didn't look in the eyes. So I think that's where human beings in future will be able to focus hopefully more on stuff that they're actually more passionate about in building community and fostering ties versus technical work that is analytical by its nature will be more done by machines, and we probably will do the nice and fun stuff.
Okay, so my last question here is many questions, but I'll pick because we have 5 minutes on the timer. So this is a productivity question because we're all busy people. How has AI improved your personal life, your workflow, personally? So let me start with an example. so this is a true story, guys. I live in the first floor of my apartment block, and it was a really sunny day, and I live in London, and the sun's never out, so I kept a pot of my plant outside my window just for 5 minutes, and I was brushing my teeth, and I come back to see my pot's fallen down into the ground floor's backyard, the ground floor person's backyard. And I'm like, how do I say sorry? But it wasn't intentional, it was accidental. So I asked ChatGPT, hey ChatGPT, how do I tell my annoying old neighbor that this is accidental, but I really like her, I want to have a good relationship with her. So it really drafted me a letter, which I could put it on a postcard, and I sent it to her, and she said, oh, thank you so much, I really love it. Fortunately, it didn't fall on my head, so I'm alive. I'm like, thank God, this is safe. So that's how ChatGPT really saved my relationship with this really old, very English neighbor. Yes, so I'd love to bring in whether it's helped you, have you used ChatGPT in your personal lives, workflows? Yeah, love to hear stories. Yeah.
I will just start. I think made my life easier recently. When I introduce people to each other, I also always provide a summary about the other person so that they know who we're talking about. I had to introduce one of our medical advisors to someone. I basically copy-pasted the LinkedIn profile to ChatGPT and asked, write a summary, intro, 2 sentences. And that, worked out really well. Took 2 minutes instead of like reading it and spending 15 minutes on that, where even though maybe if not 100% correct, I think that's like okay to do. Okay. That is one thing.
So I wrote to you on LinkedIn, and 2 days later your assistant reached out. Was that a real person or was that an AI assistant?
No, that was
Chief of Staff.
Sorry, can you say again?
So I reached out to you on LinkedIn.
To me? No, that's
yes.
no, that's
a real person?
Yeah.
Okay, definitely. Okay. You never know. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, you get a lawyer's answer.
It
increased the workflow, and I have a lawyer who is specialized on AI only. So the impact is my work-life balance gets worse.
Okay.
I, to be honest, don't use it that much yet. I have to admit. I would lie. I mean, use ChatGPT sometimes.
Any other
For
tool?
example, the other day I used it for like a macroeconomic analysis of the metaverse, whatever. Like I needed to come up with some sort of position paper. I was like, hey, what's the trends in 2030? What's the total GDP, jobs created by 20? I should know it by heart, I don't know it. So I was like, hey, ChatGPT, what's actually popping? So within 5 seconds, you have an amazingly written action. And they can, obviously can nuance it, give it more human touch, give it more whatever, bossy touch. So that's one. And I think in everyday life, we already have so much AI infusing our life that we don't know yet of, or we're probably not aware. So my Spotify playlist is just flawless. Like the music it serves me is mind-blowing. I'm like, how does it, like obviously it's fed by whatever I liked and how long I listen to certain music. So I think it's already out there, but we probably are not very aware of where it's already been applied. Same with Google search, same with our news feed. Images, suggestions, stuff you can tag, that's all AI fed already. And it's, I think, just the beginning of what we see as a consumer, because the back end is oftentimes not very, very visible to us.
Yeah. Thank you. Isabel?
Well, I can just add on to that, where we're doing like the university curriculum for University of Basel, and they asked me to do a RFP, and I was like, oh man, this request for proposal. So I was like, ChatGPT, we kind of agreed on everything already, so I was like, why do I have to do this? But let's do it, let's keep everybody happy. And it gave me a really good grid and reworked it. On the private side, I have a very funny anecdote too. So like the 16-year-old Levin comes to me and he's supposed to get a job now. And I was like, oh, can't you start working? I've been pushing him to do it. He has no work experience. So we were setting up a CV and then we both were lost and we didn't kind of know what should we put if he has no work experience on his CV. And then we asked ChatGPT and it was his, he did it. I didn't even have the idea. And then he came up with a really good quote like that. I don't even know, let's say it was Einstein, I don't know who it was, but you have to start somewhere, and that was just on his CV in the main part. So stuff like this is very useful, and I was impressed that he was using it and younger generations are using it.
Well, we're on time, and I'm getting signal from the backstage that I need to wrap it up. Thank you so much, everyone, for patiently listening to us and staying here throughout the talk. I hope you had something to take away. Have a great rest of the evening. Thank you. Thank you again. Yeah.